Okay, so I'm just going to go on now to the questions and answers, and let me just give a time check. It's 20:34, so we're a little over, but we're not too bad actually, all things considered. Not by Irish standards anyway. So we have had questions submitted, you know, via the website when people were registering. So we have a question for each of the panelists, and maybe if you take about a minute to answer each one. So the first question is for you, Julie. And the question is, what might the consequences be if single-sex spaces became obsolete?
Feminists would lose a battle that took decades upon decades to win, but more importantly than that, all women everywhere would lose the right to prevent male violence, to escape male violence, to organise as women fighting patriarchy, to be lesbians with the definition that we decide is appropriate for us, not queer, not non-binary, not trans men, but lesbians. It would have a devastating effect on the murder rates of women, on the statistics regarding violence against women around the globe, and it would take us decades upon decades to get back from that.
Very succinct. Thanks, Julie. Clara, there's a question here for you, and the question is, what do the different threats against women all have in common?
Thank you. So actually so many things, but so for starters, we can see that the neoliberal and left-wing identity politics and the far-right conservative threat against women's rights, they have in many ways similar economic policies that are hurting women and girls, but perhaps more important in this context is that they have the same view that sex and gender is forever connected. So the conservative view, of course, is that your sex determines your gender, but the neoliberal view would then be a bit simplified, of course, but that the gender determines your sex. You should sense your sex according to match your gender expressions. But so in that way, they have the similar positions, but with different arguments. But for us as radical feminists, it's about liberating gender from sex so that women and men, boys and girls can behave and express any way they like. And I think that what we see in Sweden, and I think all over the world, is that all the time us radical feminists are being accused of being conservative and religious, and we can see that our oppositions, the pro-gender oppositions, are trying to link us to those the conservative backlash, but we have to do the same thing with them. We have to show all the common denominators between the neoliberal postmodern identity politics as well as the far right and religious populist agenda. So we need to use the same method back at them.
Very good. Thank you, Clara. Thank you. Yağmur, there's a question here for you, and it's, how can young women resist the pornified neoliberal sexist culture that's been imposed upon us?
There's a lot of qualification of that culture there. There's a lot to untangle. I mean, my heart goes out to even young women, even younger than me. I think Stella's presentation really captured that really well. I can only give my personal coping strategy for this. And when it gets really overwhelming, I think about the Stepford Wives and the film, the original film from 1975, very good film. And I think about Joanna Ebbard's character played by Catherine Ross. It's really worth a watch. It's on YouTube, it's free. And she has this long speech where she's talking about the perfect pornographized woman. And she's going on and on about her. And she says she'll be perfect and she'll cook and she'll clean and she'll be wonderful, but she will not be me. And I think this is why I'm in this pursuit of sense of self, because it makes you realize that I can only capitulate at the cost of losing myself. And this in turn reminds me of Nawal el-Saadawi, when she says women have to pay a price anyway, so why not the price of freedom?
Excellent, Yağmur, thank you very much. And Kathleen, a question for you. What can young radical feminist students in universities do to challenge the grip of third wave feminism?
Well, they first need to get together with each other if they can identify themselves to each other. They need to have those conversations, then organise. So if they've got fight in them, there is a precedent now in the UK, in Bristol and in Cambridge, at least there are two radical feminist student societies that put on events. And so if you've got the fight in you to do that, you should. If you're feeling intimidated, I would think meet up with other radical feminists in your town. They don't have to be in university. There's lots of radical feminists emerging, because the good news about all this is that because academia and the third sector can't talk about women anymore, the grassroots can. So the grassroots are emerging. We can see it tonight, and it's absolutely brilliant. And that is where all the energy, the power, and the freedom of speech is. So they get out of the university and join in there, and then maybe you can bring it back into the universities later.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kathleen. And finally, Gail, there's a question here for you. And the question asks, what is the latest research saying about the effects of pornography?
Well, there's lots of new research coming out, but one of the main things is showing the way that, as the other speakers have spoken about, is how women have internalized the pornified view of themselves and are sort of co-opting it and taking, really giving up a sense of feminism, instead embracing a sense of the pornified women. And I want to mention something that Yağmur said about the Stepford Wives. You know, when I originally wrote Pornland, I wanted my book to be called not Pornland. I put it in and it was called the Stepford Sluts, quote, because what I was talking about was how in the 1950s men wanted for capital and patriarchy wanted the Stepford Wives, and now in pornified society we want the Stepford, quote, sluts, because what it is a way in which patriarchy and capitalism shapes the needs and then imposes it upon women. So I think what women are really doing now is really losing a sense of what it means to have a sense of themselves outside of this pornified culture, to the point that they self-objectify. And studies show that the more they self-objectify, the more depressed, the more anxious, the more likely they are to have suicidal ideation. So it's really on us, I think, to go out and help these young women navigate this awful terrain that they are living in. Because I don't think many of them remember what it's like to grow up in the days of radical feminism. It was fantastic. For those of us who are older, just remember how great it was. And to think what these poor young women are now denied is terrible.
Great, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Gail, for that. Now I'm going to try and wrap up as succinctly as I can. I know sometimes it's a nice idea to be able to kind of get a pithy way of stitching, you know, all of the commentary together, but I'm not even going to do that. I think each speaker's work, you know, is so separate and so individual, it wouldn't do it justice. I would, at this point, like to say a very, very big thank you to all of tonight's panelists. We really are truly honoured that all of you have taken your time and intellectual labour to attend an Irish event. And I would ask that the attendees to please go and check out all of the speakers' websites and follow them on social media to stay connected with their work. I also want to thank very much the 500 plus attendees who attended tonight's event. And to those of you who shared and promoted the event, to your own social media followers beforehand, an extra special thank you to you too. A very quick reminder to those who were asking about donations, the Irish Women's Lobby now has a buy me a coffee option on the website. It's a virtual coffee, and I think the link might also be posted in the chat as we finish up here. A virtual coffee donation is €5, and for anyone who is in a position to contribute, your donation will go towards the cost of web hosting for this and maybe for future seminars, which I'm reliably informed are already in the pipeline. So finally, I'd like to close this International Women's Day event by paying tribute to a somewhat obscure reference in many ways, but I thought I would like to give a shout out to Hedy Lamarr, who, though well recognized as an actor, is less celebrated as a scientist and as an innovator. And Hedy Lamarr developed the communication protocol which gave rise to Wi-Fi. And it's this legacy, I think, that is enabling us as women to connect across the world from our kitchen tables this evening. And I think it's very powerful that we can use this technology in quite a subversive way in many ways, and hopefully it will be a mechanism through which we will be able to get a revival of more feminist action. So I just wanted to name check her there for anyone who mightn't have been aware of that. So all that remains for me, I think, is to sign off by wishing you all a very happy International Women's Day and a very good night from Ireland. Ihawaii.
Thank you.